Hey guys, it's Wayne. Hope everyone is doing amazing. Welcome to the Bigfoot Report. My good friend Tiffany and I wanted to share a few stories with you about the big hairy ones that live in the woods. First one, we're going to be talking about the hunting cabin. We'll follow that up with the story about the whistle man. Then we'll end it with the hike from hell. We know you guys are ready. We're ready. So sit back, relax, because we're about to get started.
I've shared this experience with a few people over the years, but after you've been called crazy so many times, you just start keeping it to yourself. I really enjoy all of your podcasts, so I thought I'd share my encounter. Do with it what you like. My name is Roger, and I'm from East Texas, not far from the Big Thicket. The Big Thicket is actually where our hunting cabin is located. My father built it back in the 70s. It's nothing fancy by any means, but it was always a nice little place to get away to. It had no power or water run to it, but we put a generator out there in the late 80s, and we put some food-grade containers out to catch rainwater. That made it a little more comfortable, but you never really wanted to stay for too long. The activity started pretty soon after building the place. Strange vocals like caws and growls, whoop-type sounds, and tree knocks. That turned into rocks getting tossed at the cabin from time to time. Seems like Dad and my Uncle Bobby always played everything off. I always had an excuse for everything that happened. I now think that they knew these things were out there and didn't want to scare us kids. Anyway, time goes on and weeks turn into years, and before you know it, no one's been at that old cabin in a couple decades. That's when I decided to try my hand at renovating it. Dad passed away in 2014 and left the property to me and my brother, and neither of us wanted to see it go to waste. It always reminded us of great times with our dad and Uncle Bobby. It was spring of 2015 when my brother Kenny and I decided to head out there to have a look at what we had in store for us. It was surprisingly in good shape. We were tickled to see that it was still not only standing, but fairly solid. There were a couple windows that were broken, but other than that, we really couldn't complain. All the old furniture and bedding was still there, and we're going to need replacing, but it was definitely worth sleeping there. We had bought our camping gear thinking that's probably where we would be sleeping for the next few days we planned on staying. It was nice to see that we'd have a roof over our head for the nights. We got to looking around the property, walked in a little ways into the woods. We didn't have any neighbors for miles and wanted to get a feel for the property that we hadn't been to in years. We followed a game trail for about half a mile, and that's when we found the first track. It looked like a huge, bare human footprint. All the memories of the sounds and the rocks that were thrown at the cabin came flooding back. Ken and I just stood there looking at each other. He broke the silence when he said, "Are you effing kidding me? Are there effing Bigfoots here?" He seemed almost happy at the thought. Then again, he was a big weirdo. He loved Bigfoot stuff. He watched all the shows and movies on the subject, even had a Bigfoot sticker on his truck. I, on the other hand, was not so amused. I wasn't necessarily a non-believer, but I wasn't a believer either. I guess you could say I just didn't care either way. He was as giddy as a schoolgirl. We spent a few more minutes looking around and then decided to head back before dark set in. We had no idea what kind of horror was waiting for us back at that cabin, though. On our way back was when we heard the first of several wood knocks. We still had no idea of what we were in for. We make it back to the cabin and everything just feels different. The air is so much heavier. That's the only way I know to explain it. Ken was the first to notice that the front door, which was perfectly fine before we went on our hike, now appeared to have been kicked in. It was completely off the hinges. This wasn't no cheap door either, like the kind that are mass-produced nowadays. This was an old door that was built to last. As we started up the stairs to investigate, I noticed the biggest turd I have ever seen just laying on the bottom step. And I'm sorry to be so blunt, but that's the only way I know how to put it. Something huge took a massive dump on our steps. Needless to say, Ken's fascination quickly turned to fear, and we decided right then that this just wasn't worth it, and we just wanted to leave. Luckily, we hadn't yet unpacked, so everything was still on the truck. We jump in and start down the driveway. This wasn't your typical driveway in a residential neighborhood. This was about half a mile long of rutted out dirt that winded through the woods before ending on the main road. About halfway out was when we ran into the huge tree that was now laying across the driveway. Again, like the door and the giant poop, it was not there hours earlier when we first arrived. Something didn't want us to leave. I say something and not someone, because it would have taken 10 grown men to move that tree. As we examined it, we noticed that it didn't just fall. There was no disturbed ground where a tree would have been and fallen over. It was placed there. I'll be honest, at that moment I had never been more happy to be a Texan. If there's one thing we take pride here in Texas, it's our guns. Being that this was a hunting cabin, and we intended to do some while there, we were pretty well armed. We're also lucky that we were there to work and had all of our tools with us, which included a couple chainsaws. We had no idea what we were going to run into, so we came prepared, and I strongly believe that's the only reason we were able to get away that day. I had my .357 on my hip and my .30-06 on my shoulder, standing guard, as Ken made quick work of that tree. I'd say it only took him about 10 minutes to get it cut up and cleared out, enough for us to get through. But it honestly felt like hours. I was on edge the whole time, with the feeling of multiple eyes on us the whole time. We were able to get loaded up and made it out without further incident. Some may ask if this was truly a Sasquatch encounter, given that neither Ken nor myself actually laid eyes on one. Well, I challenge anyone to tell me what else it could have been. Other than the smell of the shit log on our steps, we never smelled anything. But all the other classic signs of a Bigfoot encounter were there. We haven't been back to the cabin, and we have not decided what, if anything, we're going to do with it. It's not like we paid for it, and neither one of us really need the money. I honestly wouldn't feel right selling it anyway. I couldn't live with myself if we did and someone got hurt, or worse, killed out there. As far as I'm concerned, those big hairy bastards can have that damn place. I know this is a lot to take in, and it isn't the scariest or most intense encounter you've ever heard, but it does speak to the possible behavior of these creatures. These things are smart and do not want to be messed with. I, for one, will be giving them their space. Well, there you have it. Not the best one you've ever heard, I'm sure, but it's the truth, and it happened to my brother and I in East Texas. They are here, and they are mean as hell.
The story has been passed down through my family for generations. My grandfather's father, which would make him my great-grandfather, used to talk about the Whistle Man. These days, these things are called Sasquatch or Bigfoot, whichever you prefer. They are one and the same, as far as I know. My dad asked his grandfather one time why it was called the Whistle Man. He told him that one day he might hear the whistles himself. My great-granddad was born in the late 1800s and did most of his growing up in the early 1900s. I can't imagine the things he must have seen in those North Georgia mountains, but there are a few he would talk about. Before I get going too far, Let me first warn you, as everyone with these kind of stories does, this is some hard stuff to believe. Hell, I don't even know how much of it I believe. But I can tell you this with absolutely no doubt. My grandfather is one of the best men I have ever known, and he is only surpassed by my dad. There are no two men I respect more on this planet than those two. I obviously didn't know my great granddad, but that is exactly what both those men say about him. That's the only proof I need. If you need more, there's nothing I can do for you. The story begins in the fall of some year in the early 20th century, between 1905 and 1910, I was told. As I mentioned, my family lived in the North Georgia mountains. We still live there to this day. My great-granddad would spend all his free time in the woods after the chores of the working farm were done, of course. I know my family milked the cows, and the chickens would lay their eggs. This wasn't a huge farm where a lot of money was coming in. To hear Grandpa tell it, they were quite poor, but they were happy. Like I was saying, he would spend all of his free time in the woods with the whistle man. I'll just jump to it because I don't really know a better way to say it. My great-grandfather's best friend was a Sasquatch. There you have it. Laugh if you will, but it's the truth. And I'm going to tell you what I was told about how they met. The meeting. He was walking through the North Georgia woods one day when the whistling began. This was nothing new to him. He heard it every time he went out. He said one day he asked his uncle who or what was whistling over on the North Ridge. His uncle told him it was a booger, that he had seen him several times, that some of the old folks called him the Whistle Man. So I guess that's where the name originated. His uncle told him to be very careful, that the thing had never bothered him before, but we don't know much about them, and he knew there were more. But that one was harmless as far as he knew. As you can imagine, his mind started working overtime, and after that, it was pretty much all he could think about. He started going over to the North Ridge every single day after the work was done. He wanted so badly to see the Whistle Man, but all he ever got was those whistles. He started racking his brain trying to come up with a way to get the thing to make himself known. All he wanted was a peek. One day, after milking the cows, he slid a small jar of fresh milk off to the side and hid it behind a woodpile. He had already put a couple of biscuits from breakfast in his pocket. When all the work was done, he grabbed that jar of milk and those biscuits and tore off up the ridge behind the house. In no time, he was over on the North Ridge. He stood beside this old oak tree, probably the biggest around, and he started to yell out. I don't know if you can hear me or if you can even understand me, but I brought you something. I would like to meet you and learn from you. I'm going to leave these right here on this stump. He said he felt plumb stupid yelling all that out to absolutely no one, but he didn't know what else to do. The next day, he did the same thing. Got some fresh milk, a couple of biscuits, and this time he brought a small jar of honey. When he got to the stump, he couldn't believe what he saw. The biscuits were gone, but he expected that. Anything could have gotten those. The jar of milk, though, that shocked him. The empty jar was half in a hole that was in that old oak tree about 5 feet off the ground. When he pulled the jar out, it had a couple stones and some dried out flowers crammed into it. He could not believe what he was holding. But as he was looking at it in his hand, the loudest whistle he had ever heard rang out and about caused him to drop the glass jar. He jumped and spun around and saw nothing at all. He thought to himself, dang, that was close. He sat the things that he had brought down on that stump and began to yell out again, thank you for my gift. I'm glad you enjoyed yours. I would like to thank you in person one day. Again, he felt stupid for doing this, but what did he have to lose? This exact routine went on for a couple weeks. Each time, the return whistles getting closer and closer. Finally, whether he was ready or not, his request was about to be granted. It was a day just like the past 15 or so. He brought the goods, sat them down, and received his gifts. This time, there was no whistle. This caught him off guard, and he admitted he first thought maybe the whistle man just wasn't around. He was about to find out how mistaken he was. Instead of a whistle, he heard what he called a grunt. He said it was weird though, because he more felt it than heard it. He was terrified in that moment. The sound came from directly behind him. He just stood there and gathered the nerve to turn around. He immediately regretted the decision to come out there. But what could he do now? He reminded himself that this is what he had been working toward and waiting for all this time. He then turned around to the shock of his life. He admitted that when he saw the giant, he peed himself. He lost control of his bladder, and there it went. He stood there trembling, and now wet from the waist down. He watched the thing standing there, swaying ever so gently from left to right. He said the first thing he thought was, how in the hell did that thing get so close to me without making a sound? It was less than 20 feet from him, standing out in the open. He could see every inch of this guy. He talked about how human-like this thing looked. He had hair all over except for his face. Its mouth was enormous, and he talked about how he was positive if it wanted to, it could fit 2 oranges in there. The nose was flat and wide. He was brown in color, with a single white gray patch above his left ear. The ears, he said, he was only able to see a few times due to the hair covering them, but they were smaller than his own. He didn't know if that was common for all of them or just something unique to this one, but they were extremely small. You've heard me call it a him or a he a few times, and there's reason for that. His penis was visible, so it was definitely a male. As for his feet, he just always said Bigfoot was a very fitting name for those guys. As for the height, he was 8'7" tall. How he knows this, we will talk about later. His feet were just under 19 inches long and 8 inches wide, just below the toes at the widest point. Okay, how did he know the measurements? As their friendship progressed, my great-grandpa was able to measure him. He took one of his mother's measuring strips that she would use for sewing. My dad said he laughed one time when talking about measuring his feet. The big guy kept getting tickled and pulling away. He talked about it not sounding like a normal laugh sound that you and I make, but that's what he got the feeling it was. His meetings with the whistle man went on almost daily for 2 years. And then one day, they just stopped. He has no idea why. There was no indication that he was sick or that anything was wrong. He just stopped showing up. And the gifts my great-grandpa would leave stopped getting taken. Well, taken by the big guy anyway. He could tell that something was getting it because there would be crumbs and half-eaten biscuits left, and the jars of milk would be knocked over. Before, there would always be something left in it in return, and it was always placed in the hole. My great-grandpa was heartbroken, to say the least. He continued going out there, hoping he'd come back for at least another 6 or 8 months daily. He never did find out what happened to the whistle man, and it's not like you could file a missing persons report or anything. He did say that many, many more times throughout his life he would hear a distant whistle. Do with this what you will, but as I said, the men in my family were all amazing and honorable men. I'm the man I am today because of them. I know my great-grandpa loved that big dude. And if I'm being honest, I kind of wish I could someday have that kind of relationship with the whistle man.
Bigfoot is real. I honestly never thought those words would ever come from me. But there they are. I have always been a hardcore skeptic, to the point of uncontrollable eye rolls at the first mention of a giant ape-like creature in North America. I mean, North America. Come on now, right? As much land as we now occupy and continue to go further, with the advent and abundance of camera technology that we as a society now possess, we'd have undisputed photo and video evidence by now, right? These were all arguments I had made. They are all arguments I still can't dispute, really. There absolutely should be more. Why isn't there? I went straight from a skeptic to a knower. My encounter certainly isn't going to win any award for the most frightening tale ever told, but it sure affected me. It was the fall of 2020, and COVID was in full force. I had been laid off of my job for several months at this point. As a husband and father of 3 kids, all under 10, quarantine was slowly kicking my ass. I needed to get away. Thank God I have such an amazing wife, as she noticed this and is the one that suggested I take some time for myself. I hadn't been hiking or camping in years, and it used to be my passion. I completed the through hike of the Appalachian Trail in my early 30s, and at that point it was my greatest accomplishment. Since then I've married and had my kids, so they took over the greatest thing I'd ever done. Man, did I miss hiking though. This was my opportunity to get back to it, if only for a little bit. Mind you, I was nowhere near in the kind of shape it would take to repeat the Appalachian Trail again. I did some looking around on a hiking app that I downloaded and found a trail that seemed perfect. It was basically a huge circle. I'm not disclosing the area I was in, because if I mentioned the state and the region, anyone could do what I did and figure out the trail I'm talking about. I just don't want a bunch of Bigfoot hunters to hear this and go running around these woods with shotguns and rifles. Nobody needs that. That being said, to complete the full loop, it'd take someone in reasonable shape about 2.5 days to complete it. I got out my old gear. It was still in really good shape. Some of it had to be replaced. So that was my next step. Finally, just over a week of planning and preparation, and I was ready to go. It would have been nice to have someone with me, but I wasn't able to find anyone. I'll admit that almost made me call the whole thing off, but man, I needed a break. Finally, the day had come. I allowed myself 3 days to finish the hike. I feel like I took all the necessary precautions. My wife knew where I was going to be and when I should be back. Always let someone know where you're going and when to expect you back. That's day one stuff. The first day was rather uneventful. All went to plan other than me not quite being in the shape I thought I was. The day took it out of me, and by the time I got my hammock strung up and a small fire going, it was all I had left. I was too tired to even eat anything. I lay down and I don't think I opened my eyes again until the birds woke me up the next morning. It was probably the best sleep I'd had in years. I needed that, but man, was I hungry. I downed one of my breakfast MREs and began packing up for the next leg of the hike. This was about the time the feeling first came over me. A feeling I didn't quite understand. Dread is the only way I know how to explain it. I really felt like there were eyes on me from somewhere. I did my best to brush it off. I had encountered wild animals on hikes before, but this felt different. I did my best to not let it bother me, though. I knocked out several miles and had all but forgotten about that feeling. All seemed to be perfect. Then out of nowhere, that perfection was shattered. That's when I caught my first glimpse of something black running through the trees and brush. This wasn't low to the ground, like around 3 to 4 feet high, like you would expect a black bear to be. This was every bit as tall as I was, probably a bit more. My mind started running all over the place at what this could possibly be. Being over 6 feet tall, it had to have been something on 2 legs. A man wearing all black was the only thing that made sense, and if I'm being honest, that worried me even more. An animal you expect to be there, a man moving that fast and trying to stay hidden from you could not be good. I called out to whoever this was and said, "Hello, can I help you? Is everything all right?" I got no answer though, and even though I saw this thing, it's important to tell you I never heard it. Not one sound. I had no idea what to do. Let's be real here. What could I do? I kept walking. A few hours go by and I'd completely stopped thinking about it when it happened again. That same flash of black, 30 feet to my left. This time I was scared. Again, I never heard anything. On top of everything else, there was no way I was going to be able to finish the hike. So that meant I'd be staying another night out there with this whatever it is. I was honestly terrified at this point. I had no other choice, though. I found a good spot and set up camp. I ate a small dinner and climbed into my hammock. This time, I put up my rain fly. I knew this would do absolutely nothing to protect me, but it did give that false sense of security. And at the very least, it meant I wouldn't open my eyes to see someone or something standing over me. Realizing that sleep would never find me that night. It eventually did. But then, of course, before then, every little sound of the forest had me on edge. It was around 1 a.m. when I was awoken by something. I couldn't tell you what, but I was suddenly wide awake. It was right after then that I first heard it. It sounded like a twig breaking. I laid there and convinced myself it was nothing. The wind, or something like that. Then I started to hear the breathing. I swear, I almost lost it. Tears started filling my eyes. I had never in my life been so afraid that I cried. This breathing was like no other breathing I'd ever heard. It was extremely raspy and labored, like it was taking everything this thing had just to breathe. Like it was severely congested with the worst cold you've ever had. I honestly have no idea what mindset this thing was in, but the way the breathing sounded made it sound pissed. I'm still thinking it's a bear. Like an idiot, I didn't have my bear spray in the hammock with me. I told myself before laying down to get it, but you know how that goes, and of course, I forgot. I found out quickly this was no bear, though. Bears don't have human-type feet. This thing had made its way beside me and was standing right beside my hammock. From the bottom of the rainfly, I could see the 2 biggest, most disgusting-looking feet I had ever seen. The whole time, this breathing is still rattling my chest. I'm not particularly a religious man, but I was begging God at that moment to please help me through this. It was probably about a minute. This thing was standing there when I first noticed the giant handprint coming through my rain fly. I could see the perfect outline of this massive hand. I honestly thought that was it for me, that my stuff would be found in the woods a week or so later, but I never would. I started thinking about my wife and kids and how much I love them. That's when this calm came over me. I felt so relaxed, and I'll be damned if I didn't fall back to sleep. I've heard people say that before during an encounter. I always thought it was a load of crap. I don't anymore, because it absolutely happened to me. The next morning when I woke up, all I could do was question the whole thing. Was it all just a dream? I get out of the hammock to find that the area around my camp had been walked through, and my bag had been gone through. It wasn't a dream. Another weird thing is, I wasn't afraid anymore. I took my time and packed up. I was less than half a day's hike from my car, so I just took my time. Before I set out, I took a couple granola bars, opened them, and sat them on a rock in camp. Kind of a thank you for not eating me the night before, I guess. I made it back to my car with absolutely nothing else happening. So this is why I can now say without a doubt, Bigfoot is real. Believe me or don't, but it was not a dream. This happened to me, and I am forever changed by it.